We see this paradox in clinical practice daily. High-functioning, logical, competent adults who devolve into deeply irrational actors the moment a relationship conflict begins. This loop is the seeker-bunker dynamic. It is a specific, highly predictable behavioral cycle where anxious pursuit from one partner collides with avoidant withdrawal from the other. Practitioners have traditionally assigned severe clinical labels to the people trapped inside this loop: codependency, emotional immaturity, narcissism, or therapeutic resistance. These pathologizing labels obscure the actual mechanism at work. The biological driver beneath this escalating behavior is a process called adaptive neuroception. Viewing dependency as a character flaw blinds clinicians to the reality of the room. These behaviors represent unupdated nervous systems executing flawless, hardwired survival programming. Neuroception is the nervous system's subconscious precognitive scanning process. It continuously evaluates the surrounding world for cues of safety, danger, or life threat. This system evaluates three specific targets: the external environment, other people's bodies and facial expressions, and your own internal visceral state. Because this evaluation happens entirely below the level of conscious thought, clients cannot simply decide to relax. They cannot rationalize their way out of a triggered state because their biology has already made a survival computation before their conscious brain registers the event. This explains why cognitive talk therapy routinely fails in moments of high relational conflict. Talk therapy targets the prefrontal cortex, but the actual crisis is occurring in a precognitive biological database, responding only to specific cues of physical safety. Stephen Porges' polyvagal theory provides the underlying architecture that explains these precognitive responses. It organizes the autonomic nervous system into a three-tiered evolutionary hierarchy that dictates how we respond to relational stress. This diagram illustrates the top tier of that ladder. The highest evolutionary circuit is the ventral vagal network. When this myelinated neural pathway is dominant, it produces feelings of safety, enables social engagement, and allows for complex connection. If the environment fails to provide safety, the system automatically drops down the ladder and recruits the sympathetic circuit. This triggers immediate fight or flight mobilization to address the perceived threat. If mobilization fails to resolve the danger, the system drops into the basement. It collapses into the ancient dorsal vagal circuit, resulting in freeze, dissociation, or complete biological shutdown. Dysregulated couples are not stubbornly refusing to communicate. They have fallen off the top of this biological ladder and are operating out of competing, primitive survival circuits. We can analyze the anxious attachment style, the seeker, directly through this polyvagal lens by looking at how their system originally calibrated to threat. The anxious pattern develops in early relational environments characterized by inconsistent care. The developing nervous system learns that connection is available, but deeply unpredictable. The nervous system responds to this ambiguity by developing a mechanism called hyperactivation. The learned survival response is to amplify distress, to turn up the signal of need, to guarantee the caregiver cannot ignore them. In adulthood, the seeker's protest behaviors, obsessive phone checking, intense rumination, and escalating arguments map directly onto the sympathetic tier of the polyvagal ladder. The seeker's hypervigilant pursuit represents a biologically correct sympathetic mobilization, attempting to force a response and secure an unstable relational baseline. The avoidant attachment style, the bunker, relies on a distinct biological strategy to survive early emotional unavailability. Their nervous system utilizes deactivation. This is the systematic suppression of attachment needs, where the body learns to turn the signal down and enforce self-sufficiency to avoid the danger of relying on an unresponsive caregiver. This highlights the reality that avoiding connection outwardly does not mean the internal biological imperative for connection has disappeared. This split-screen graphic tracks outward behavior on the top against internal physiological data on the bottom. When researchers measure skin conductance and heart rate during a relationship conflict, the data proves that avoidant individuals experience identical autonomic arousal to their anxious partners. We can map the bunker's emotional withdrawal directly to the dorsal vagal tier. Their distance is a literal biological shutdown deployed to manage overwhelming internal anxiety. The bunker remains trapped in a dorsal vagal collapse, where their body is screaming, but their evolutionary strategy conceals the panic. If these two strategies are so opposed, why do anxious and avoidant nervous systems disproportionately seek each other out and pair up? The nervous system equates familiarity with safety. The bunker's intermittent availability perfectly matches the seeker's core historical template for love, triggering a familiar activation that the seeker misinterprets as chemistry. Conversely, the seeker's constant pursuit paradoxically comforts the bunker. It provides a calibrated distance that reassures the bunker the relationship is secure, without triggering their fears of engulfment or abandonment. This diagram illustrates the ultimate biological collision. The seeker's sympathetic escalation directly triggers the bunker's dorsal withdrawal, creating an inescapable, self-reinforcing polyvagal trap. Because this specific conflict pushes the partners into two opposing, competing autonomic states, fight or flight versus freeze, biological co-regulation between them becomes impossible without external intervention. To break the seeker-bunker loop, a third-party biological intervention is required. That intervention is the practitioner's own regulated ventral vagal state. This relies on the social engagement system, or SES. The SES is the physical infrastructure of connection, structurally linking the ventral vagal circuit to the muscles of the face, head, and vocal cords. This diagram illustrates the SES in action. The practitioner's facial warmth, specific vocal prosody, and physical stillness act as direct biological data inputs. These inputs intercept the client's erratic states and provide the safety cues necessary to update their neuroception. A practitioner's personal nervous system regulation practice is the foundational clinical competence required to transmit safety in the therapy room. Safety itself is the treatment. Biological co-regulation from a grounded professional must occur before we can expect any form of client self-regulation. The ultimate therapeutic target of somatic interventions, like the biosanctuary method, is a profound neurological state Porges calls immobilization without fear. This state represents the body dropping into complete physical stillness because it deeply trusts its environment, a significant departure from the defensive shutdown seen in trauma responses. This physical manifestation of the inner sanctuary represents true intimacy and neurobiological peace. It is the exquisite combination of ventral vagal safety and dorsal calm. The clinical focus rests on providing the precise biological conditions necessary for their old threat codes to update naturally. By mastering the polyvagal architecture of attachment, clinicians can stop fighting outward behavioral symptoms. We finally gain the tools to heal the underlying biological imperative of human dependency.